My sister stood in our parents' kitchen with her mascara smudged just enough to look believable and told everyone I cleaned out her wedding card box, $8,500, gone, and somehow it was my hands that did it. Mom had already decided I was guilty before I'd even taken my boots off at the door. What none of them knew was that 2 days earlier, I'd driven the hour and a half back out to the winery and asked the coordinator to pull one specific camera. The little black drive I plugged into Dad's TV that night didn't just clear my name. It took the tidy story they built and set the whole thing on fire. Stay with me because the part that actually broke them comes near the end, and do hit subscribe so this doesn't disappear out of your feed. Quick thing first, because I'm always curious, drop the city you're watching from in the comments. I genuinely read them. So, where to start? I'd been home maybe 4 hours when the call came. It was a Sunday, late October, the kind of grey Ontario afternoon where the sky just sits on the rooftops and doesn't do anything. The wedding weekend had wrung me out. 3 days of being the dependable one, steaming dresses, herding aunts, paying the corkage when the bar tab ran over because nobody else had thought to bring a card, and I had finally peeled off my heels and parked myself on the couch with a tea and a heating pad on my back. My place is small, a one-bedroom near the lake, and usually the quiet feels earned. That afternoon, it felt like a hell breath. My phone lit up with Dad's name. I almost didn't answer. We'd all said our goodbyes that morning at the brunch. He and Mom were supposed to be running the newlyweds to Pearson for their flight to Lisbon. I figured someone had forgotten a garment bag in my trunk. "Hi, Dad," I said. My voice came out gravelly. I hadn't sat properly in days. There was a pause, and in that pause I already knew something was wrong because my father is not a pauser, he's a talker. He fills silence the way other people breathe. "I need you to be honest with me right now." Flat. Cold. The voice he uses with the guy at the garage when he thinks he's being upsold. I sat up. The heating pad slid off my lap onto the floor. Honest about what? Is everyone okay? Did they make their flight? They didn't get on the plane. A long breath through his nose. The card box is empty. I remember the exact shape of my confusion. Not panic yet, just a blank, like a sentence with a word missing. Empty how? Empty like someone took it to the bank. Empty like the cash and the checks are gone and your sister is sitting at my kitchen table sobbing because the only person standing near that table all night was you. The blank filled in fast then, with something cold and electric. Dad. I was not standing near, I wasn't even in the room during the send-off. I was in the washroom getting red wine out of the maid of honor's dress. Ask her. Ask Tamsin. Don't. Just that sharp enough to stop me. Don't do the thing where you talk circles around me. Your sister saw you. Your aunt saw you put a fat white envelope in your purse before you left. That was my parking stub and the thank you card. The bridal party all got one. I could hear my own voice climbing into a register I hated, thin and pleading, the register I'd spent 20 years trying to grow out of. Dad, I make good money. I work in fraud. Why on earth would I steal from my own sister's wedding? Because you've been jealous of this whole thing for months. He said it like he was reading it off a card, like it had been handed to him pre-written. You think they overspent, you've made your little comments, and city rent's expensive, we all know you're stretched. I am not stretched. I have an RSP and a pension and a savings account that would make you faint. Then it'll be no trouble to send the $8,500 to your sister's account by morning. And there it was, the velvet glove coming off. Because if it's not there, I'm not just done with you. I'll back her if she goes to the police. Don't push me on this. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone like it might explain itself. The quiet rush back into the apartment, and it wasn't peaceful anymore, it was a pressure, a hand on the back of my neck. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the phone on the cushion, and I want to be clear about what hurt, because it wasn't the accusation, not exactly. It was the speed of it. Nobody asked me what I saw. Nobody asked if I knew anything. They'd held a trial in the time it took me to drive home, and the verdict was the same one it had always been. She's the sneaky one. The text started before I'd even caught my breath. Mum, I always knew there was something not right in you, even as a little girl. Fix this before you embarrass us all. My sister, you actually did it. On my wedding day. You've always been bitter and alone, and now everyone knows. Send the money or I swear I'll make sure your work finds out. Banks love a thief on payroll, right? Dad again, 9 a.m. I mean it. I read Mum's text 3 times. Even as a little girl, I knew exactly which little girl she meant. When I was 7 and my sister was 4, my sister ate an entire row of peak freens, the whole sleeve, and then threw up blue-green all over the rec room carpet. When Mum came down the stairs hollering, my sister pointed one chubby finger at me and wailed, and I got sent to my room for the rest of the day for lying about it. I had not touched a single cookie. I'd been doing a puzzle. That was the whole arrangement, right there, decided before I was old enough to spell my own name. She was the bright one, the delicate one, the one you couldn't say no to without feeling like a monster. I was the older one, the sturdy one, the one who could take it, and apparently the one who took things. My first instinct, and I'm not proud of this, was to just pay $8,500 to make the noise stop. I had it. I could send the e-transfer, eat the apology for a crime I didn't commit, and maybe in a year or 2 we'd all pretend it never happened. That's what the old version of me did her entire life. Absorb it. Smooth it over. Keep the peace. Then I read my sister's text again. I'll make sure your work finds out. She wasn't just hurt and lashing out. She was reaching for my throat, my career, my designation, the one thing in my life I'd built entirely on my own with zero help from any of them. She was threatening to torch it to cover whatever this actually was. And that's when something in me went very, very still. Because here's the thing they all kept forgetting about me. I don't do my job by feel. I do it by record. I spend my days pulling threads out of people who are absolutely certain they've covered their tracks, and the reason I'm good at it is that liars are lazy. They construct a story, and they fall in love with it, and they stop checking the edges. My family had built a beautiful story about the jealous, broke, sneaky sister, and they were so pleased with it they hadn't checked a single edge. I opened my laptop. I went into my email and found the venue thread, because of course I had the venue thread. I'd been the one who handled the booking back in the spring when my sister was too overwhelmed with the dress to deal with logistics. I'd put the deposit on my own visa. I was the name contract holder. It was a restored stone barn at a winery out in the county, gorgeous, expensive, the kind of place that has its own historic designation and a list of rules a mile long. I scrolled the contract. Catering minimums, noise curfew, damage deposit, and then 2/3 down, for the protection of the property, its artwork and guests, the premises are under continuous high-definition video surveillance, including all entrances, the main hall, and the gift and registration area. Footage is retained for 30 days. I read it twice. The cold thing in my stomach turned into something almost like calm. I didn't call my father. I didn't call my sister. I called the venue. It was past 9, but I knew the coordinator, a no-nonsense woman named Bonnie, who'd spent 8 months talking flowers and parking and dietary restrictions with me, and I knew she stayed late after weekend events to flit the rooms. She picked up on the second ring. "You forget something, hun. We've got a clutch and a kid's cardigan in Lost and Found." "It's not that, Bonnie." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Something went missing from the gift table last night. Money. And I'm being accused of taking it. I need you to pull camera coverage of the card table, roughly between 9 and 10:30. A silence. "That's okay. Is this going to be a police thing?" "It might be." I watched the clock on my stove. "Can you send me the file? I'm the contract holder." "You are. That's true," she exhaled. "Give me 20 minutes. I'll send you a secure link. And, for what it's worth, I liked you. You were the sane one all spring. You have no idea what you just did for me, I said, and I meant it more than she could have known. While I waited, the whole history of my life with my sister played out behind my eyes, uninvited. The $2,000 I quietly gave her at 23 to clear a credit card before Dad found out. The 3 weeks I drove her to work after she totaled her car texting on the 401. The wedding itself, which had been a slow-motion disaster from the day she got engaged. A $40,000 dream on a budget that didn't exist. My parents dipping into the GICs they'd been saving for the cottage roof. Me covering the florist and the late-night food truck as my gift. Almost $4,000 I never once mentioned. And her husband, my brother-in-law, 31, leased a black SUV he couldn't comfortably afford, wore a watch I was 90% sure was a knockoff, called himself a consultant in a way that meant nothing and impressed my parents enormously. I remembered a dinner 2 weeks before the wedding, him cutting into his steak and complaining that the honeymoon 2 weeks in Portugal wasn't long enough for everything they'd been through. When I gently floated scaling back the flowers, he'd looked at me like I'd suggested they eat out of a dumpster. Easy for you to say, you live like a nun. We have standards. And my sister had laughed and said, yeah, don't be such a buzzkill, we'll clear it all in cash gifts anyway. 200 people will probably come out ahead. They counted that money before it existed. The email pinged. My heart did something painful against my ribs. I clicked the link. The player opened, crisp color footage, the timestamp ticking in the corner. There was the table, the white card box with the slot and a lid, guests drifting in the background. I dragged the scrubber to 9/20/20. There I was, walking past, my whole body braced. Did I touch it? No. I straightened a tipped-over photo frame next to the box, smiled at a passing server, and kept walking toward the washrooms. On camera for maybe 6 seconds. Then gone. I jumped ahead. 9:48, the DJ announcing the sparkler send-off, the room emptying out toward the patio doors. 9,053, the hall nearly bare. And then 2 figures came into frame from the left, moving fast, moving like they belonged there. One of them was in a wedding dress. I paused it. I zoomed in, my hand was over my mouth. It was my sister. And right beside her, holding open the canvas tote she'd used all weekend for her flat, was my brother-in-law. I hit play. I watched my sister, the heartbroken bride, the trembling victim crying at my parents' kitchen table that very moment, flip the lid of the box and start ripping envelopes open with both hands. Not reading them. Not even glancing at the cards from great-aunts and old neighbors. Tearing the paper, pulling out cash and checks, dropping the cards back in the box. My brother-in-law stood half-turned, watching the doors. Then he grabbed a fistful of the emptied envelopes and stuffed them into his suit jacket. To get rid of the evidence later, I realized, so it would look tampered with rather than cleaned out. So there'd still be cards in the box to sell the story. At one point, she held up a thick envelope, pulled out a folded stack of 20s, and pressed it to her lips. She kissed it. She actually kissed the money. It took them under 4 minutes. At 9:57, they smoothed themselves down. She checked her lipstick in the reflection of the dark window. He kissed her forehead and patted the bulging bag, and they walked out toward the sparklers to be cheered by 200 people they'd just robbed. I sat back. The air left me all at once. And then the second realization landed, the one that turned a shock into something with edges. They hadn't just stolen the gifts. They'd stolen it from themselves on purpose, and then they'd come for me. If the money was stolen and I was the thief, my parents would force me to pay it back. They'd keep the original $8,500 and collect another $8,500 from me. $17,000. That was the math. That was the whole point of crying at the kitchen table. I downloaded the file. I saved it to the laptop, then to the cloud. Then I dug a plain black USB drive out of my junk drawer and copied it there too. Then I picked up my phone and texted my father. I'll bring the money, but I'm doing it in person with everyone there. Mom, you, her, him. Dinner at the house tomorrow. I want this settled face to face. His reply came in under a minute. Good. Smart. 6:30. We'll be waiting. I looked at that little drive sitting in my palm. It weighed almost nothing, and it felt like a brick. See you at dinner, I said to my empty apartment. I didn't sleep much, and when I woke up, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like myself at work the morning a file finally cracks open. The shaking was gone. In its place was something cold and methodical, and I knew exactly what to do with it. Because in my experience, theft is never the first thing someone does. It's the last thing. There's always pressure behind it, a leak somewhere, and I had a free morning and access to the same public databases my job pays for. So before I drove anywhere, I went looking for the leak. I started with my brother-in-law. Mr. Consultant, I ran his name through Ontario's small claims records and found a judgment from 2 years back. A former landlord, just over $4,000 for unpaid rent and damage to a unit. Listed as satisfied only this past spring, right around when the wedding deposit started going out. Then I ran a PPSA search, the provincial registry where lenders file a claim against your stuff when they front you money. There was a registration from 5 months ago, not a bank. A storefront lender, the kind with neon in the window and an interest rate that would make your eyes water, the kind of place you walk into only after every real bank has already said no. Secured against all present and after acquired personal property. Amount financed, $12,000. I leaned back and drank my coffee and felt the whole shape of it click into place. 5 months before the wedding, my high-flying consultant brother-in-law had gone to a payday outfit for $12,000 at a rate that meant brutal weekly payments. Missed those, and they come hard, and then I checked my sister, who'd left her transaction history visible to anyone she'd ever sent money to, which included me. Dozens of outgoing transfers over the past few months, the little notes attached, car, rent, groceries, his half. My marketing coordinator sister, who cleared maybe $55,000 a year, had been quietly bleeding herself dry, keeping him afloat. The wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a cash flow event. They needed that card box full, and when it wasn't quite full enough, or the lender called or the panic just got too loud, they decided to take it, hide it, and bill me for the difference. I printed it all. The judgment, the PPSA registration, the screenshots, slid neatly into a manila folder. Then I drove to my credit union and asked for a bank draft for $8,500 made out to my sister. The teller smiled and asked if it was a late wedding gift. I said something like that. I told her it was more of an education. I put on what I think of as my courtroom clothes, a sharp navy blazer, good trousers, boots that make a clean, hard sound on a hardwood floor. The drive out to my parents' place in Burlington took 50 minutes. Usually that drive is a slow build of dread, me rehearsing answers to questions about why I'm still single and whether I got the promotion. That day the dread was just gone, replaced by a steady hum, every detail of the road sharp and bright. The leased SUV was parked across 2 spots in the driveway, the way he always parked. I let myself in with my key. The whole house smelled like the lasagna my mother makes only for what she calls serious family conversations. They were already at the dining table, the good dishes out, which struck me as obscene, given what we were there to do. Dad at the head, Mom on his right, not meeting my eyes, looking at my hands like she expected them to be cuffed. My sister across from my empty chair, scrubbed of makeup, hair in a messy bun, swimming in an oversized sweatshirt, the full costume of the wronged bride. Beside her, my brother-in-law in a polo a size too tight, his knee jackhammering under the table. "Sit," my father said. I sat. I put my purse on the floor and laid my leather work bag on the table. "Do you have it?" my brother-in-law said, not a hello. His eyes were on my bag. "I have a bank draft for $8,500 right here," I said, tapping the purse at my feet. His shoulders dropped a full inch. My sister sniffled and dabbed at dry eyes. I just don't get why, she said, in a small, wobbly voice. Was it the speech thing? Are you that jealous I got married first? It is pretty sick, I agreed, looking right at her. Stealing from a wedding. Let's not relitigate it, my father said, doing his patriarch of the table thing. She's here to make it right. If the full amount's transferred today, we don't bring in the police. We keep it in the family. But things change after this, you understand. We can't have you around here unsupervised. Trust is fragile, I said. Once it's broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. I completely agree. My mother nodded along, righteous and damp-eyed. I hope you're getting help, therapy. Something. You know what's funny, I said, ignoring her, keeping my voice light, almost chatty. It bugged me all night, as a food analyst, because it's such a bold crime. $8,500 in a public hall at a high-end venue, so I had a couple questions. I turned to my sister. How did you know it was exactly $8,500? She blinked. What? If the box was emptied and the cards thrown back in, if you walked up and found it gone, how did you know the precise number? I counted it, she said. Before I counted it. Before the send-off? You stepped away from your own reception to count the cash. I let that sit for a second. The knee beside her was still bouncing. That's interesting, because the venue's a historic property. Did you know they run continuous high-def surveillance on the gift table? It's in the contract. Clause about the artwork. I read it back in the spring when I booked the place for you. My brother-in-law went very still. There weren't cameras in that corner, he said. Too fast. Way too fast. We looked. You looked for cameras, I said, raising an eyebrow. We looked for the box, my sister cut in, voice spiking. After we noticed it was robbed, stop trying to confuse everyone, just give us the money. I'm not confusing anyone, I said. I'm curious, because if I took it, the cameras would show me taking it, and if the cameras show me taking it, you've got all the proof in the world to put me in jail. So why didn't you ask the venue for the footage, Dad? My father frowned. We didn't need footage. Your sister saw you. Eyewitnesses are notoriously unreliable, I said, especially when the witness has a reason to lie. How dare you? My mother's palm came down on the table, rattling the cutlery. You rob your own sister and then call her a liar at our table. Give us the money and get out. You're not eating with us. That's fair, my father said, going red. Hand it over now. Okay, I said, but first, one question for him. I turned to my brother-in-law. He looked like a deer in a headlight. There was sweat above his lip. How's it going with the lender? The one on Lakeshore? The PPSA registration from 5 months ago? 12 grand, against everything you own, at an interest rate I had to read twice. The silence in that room was total. You could hear the fridge humming in the kitchen. His face drained to the color of wet paper. I don't know what you're talking about. $12,000, I repeated, slow. From a store from Payday outfit, 5 months ago, secured against your personal property for a consulting business with no website and a mailbox at a UPS store for an address. That's a lie, my sister snapped, but her eyes darted to him. It's public record, I said. Same as the small claims judgment your last landlord won against you. Same as your e-transfer history, which shows you've been covering his car payments since spring. I reached into my bag and pulled the manila folder and slid it across the table toward my father. It's all in there, Dad. Open it. I'm not looking at your made-up paperwork, he said, but his voice had lost something. It's not made up. It's a registry search and a court judgment, and I didn't have to do anything illegal to get it. It's all public. I looked at my brother-in-law. You're drowning. You needed that card box to make a payment before they came after the SUV, but the gifts weren't enough, were they? Or you got greedy. Why settle for $8,500 when you can take $8,500 and guilt your wife's family into handing you another $85? Shut up, my sister screamed, scrambling up so fast her chair tipped. You're just jealous because I have a husband who loves me and you have nobody. I'm trying to keep you out of a courtroom, I said, my own voice finally rising to meet hers. Look at him. Look at his face right now. He knows I'm right. My mother was on her feet too, finger out, shaking. That is enough. I will not have this young man slandered in my home. He has been nothing but. You want the draft? I stood, picked up my purse, pulled the envelope out. His eyes locked onto it like a dog onto a steak. Here it is, $8,500, and I'm not giving it to you because I don't owe you a cent. You said you brought the money, my father shouted. I brought it to show you I could, I said. To show you that $8,500 isn't going to change my life, but for them, I pointed at the two of them. It's the whole game. Get out of my house, my father roared, on his feet now, his chair clattering backward. I'm done with you. You're finished in this family. Fine, I said, but before I go, you're going to watch one thing. You said she saw me at that table. You said I was the only one there. I walked to the big TV mounted over the gas fireplace, his pride and joy. So you'll have no trouble watching the footage of the actual theft. What footage? My sister said, and for the first time her voice was tiny. I held up the black drive, camera over the gift table, 9,533, the exact minute the money walked out the door. Don't plug that in, my brother-in-law said, low, and took a step toward me. Sit down, I said without turning, or I call the police right now and let them watch it first. My father lit between us. Whatever certainty had been in his face was gone. He was reading the panic in my sister's eyes, the fear in the way my brother-in-law had gone rigid. Let her play it, he said quietly. My mother started to protest. It's going to be some trick. If it's a trick, we'll know in 10 seconds, my father said, and his voice had gone hard in a new direction. Play it. I slid the drive into the side of the TV. The folder came up on the big screen. I opened the file. The room went dim and blue with it. I stepped back to the fireplace and crossed my arms and watched them watch. The timestamp ran, the near-empty hall, and then two figures coming in from the left, fast, furtive, my sister's altered gown, unmistakable even from the high angle, my brother-in-law turning to play lookout. My mother made a sound like she'd been punched, a sharp, wet gasp. My father leaned forward, mouth slightly open. On the screen, my sister flipped the lid and went at the box with both hands, tearing, pulling, kissing the stack of bills, dropping the cards back in. My brother-in-law, stuffing emptied envelopes into his jacket. My sister, the real one, picked her fork back up off the floor and stabbed at the lasagna on her plate, like eating could make this normal, and then her hand stopped, and the fork slipped, and it hit the good china with a crack that rang through the room like a gunshot. She didn't pick it up. She just stared at herself on the screen, kissing the money, her mouth open. That's you, my father whispered. Then louder, on his feet. That's you. You called me crying. You looked me in the face and told me your sister did this. You wanted me to call the police on her. It wasn't my idea, my sister sobbed, the dam going all at once, her finger swinging toward her husband. He made me. He said the lender would take the car. He said blaming her was the only way to get the extra. You're the one who said she was an easy mark, he shot back, all the charm gone, his face ugly. Mom already thinks she's sneaky. They'll believe anything. That was you. You wanted the trip. You wanted Portugal. I didn't want to go to jail, she screamed. And I just stood there by the fireplace and watched my family come apart, the golden couple turning on each other in real time, and I felt the last thread between me and them go slack. It wasn't triumph exactly. It was quieter than that. It was the feeling of finally setting down something I'd been carrying so long I'd stopped noticing the weight. My mother had her face in her hands. My father turned to my brother-in-law and said, in a voice I'd never heard from him, "You stole from the guests and then tried to extort my daughter. Get out, both of you. Get out of my house before I do something I'll regret." My sister wailed and looked at me. "Please tell him to stop, please." I looked at her. I looked at the little girl who pointed at me over a sleeve of cookies and the bride who kissed a stranger's gift money, and the woman who texted me last night that she'd get me fired, and I felt nothing I could use. "I think you should go," I said. "You've got a honeymoon to cancel." She ran out after him. We heard the front door, then the SUV tearing out the driveway, leaving her to her own car. The quiet came back into the dining room, but it was the quiet of a wreck now. I pulled the drive out of the TV. The screen went black. My parents were staring at the two empty chairs. "Sweetheart," my mother said, her voice gone, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I said, picking up my bag. "You already said it all. You said I was sneaky. You said you always knew. You believed the worst of me because it was easier than knowing the truth about her." "We were wrong," my father said, and he looked suddenly like an old man. "We were so wrong. I'm sorry." "I know you are," I said. "But sorry doesn't undo that yesterday you were ready to put me in jail without asking me a single question." My mother stood up unsteady. "Stay, please. Let us feed you. Let us talk." I looked at the lasagna sitting there, the serious conversation meal. "I have plans," I said, which was a lie. "With people who already know I don't steal." I walked to the door and let myself out into the cold, and behind me I heard my mother start to cry again, and I didn't turn around. I drove home with the $8,500 still in my purse and the heater blowing, and, for the first time in days, my hands perfectly steady on the wheel. The fallout came fast, and I didn't have to lift a finger for any of it. The truth did the work. 3 days later, the leased SUV got repossessed out of their apartment lost in broad daylight, and one of the bridesmaids who lived in the building put it in the group chat before the tow truck had even pulled away. The consultant image came down like a tent in a windstorm. The lender didn't care about anyone's feelings. When he couldn't pay, they garnished the wages from the temp job he actually had, the one he'd never mentioned, behind the consulting story he'd never had. I did make one call I'd been turning over. I phoned Bonnie at the venue and told her the truth, that the theft was internal, that it had been the bride and groom, and that I had it on her own footage. She thanked me quietly and reported it because a stage theft at her property was her problem too. The police got involved after that. Not over me, over them. My brother-in-law tried to pin the whole idea on my sister in front of a judge, which tells you everything you need to know about that marriage. They filed for an annulment 6 weeks later. Neither did jail time. The victims were technically themselves and their own guests, but they each got community service and a fine, and the social sentence, the one nobody assigns, ran a lot longer. My parents tried. Oh, they tried hard. Mom sent flowers. Dad sent a check for $5,000, an apology I hadn't asked for. I returned the check. I gave the flowers to the seniors' home down the block from me. I didn't cut them off completely, because completely takes a kind of energy I didn't want to spend on them. Instead, I put them in a box, the way I'd boxed up the evidence. I show up at Christmas for a couple of hours. I'm polite. I'm doing well, and I keep that to myself. They walk on eggshells around me now, terrified I'll vanish again. Because they've lost the golden child, and they know they're one bad move from losing the spare. My mother told me months later that she'd started seeing someone, a therapist, that she was trying to understand why she'd spent 30 years pitting two daughters against each other. "I wanted her to be the version of me that was happy," she said, "and I wanted you to be the version of me that was strong, so I punished you for being strong." It was a start. Forgiveness is a long road, and I'm in no hurry to walk it. Half a year later, I made senior analyst. We celebrated at a steakhouse downtown, a few friends, a couple of people from work, a bottle of something good. Right as we were ordering, my phone buzzed. It was my sister, the number I'd never quite blocked. "I know you hate me. Ryan left me with all the debt. I'm in a basement apartment eating noodles. Can you lend me $300 for groceries? I'll pay you back, I swear." I looked at it for a long moment. I thought about the cookies and the kiss she'd pressed to that stolen money, and the text about getting me fired. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel pity either. I just felt clear. I typed back, "You should ask Mum and Dad. They always had a soft spot for your version of things. Then I blocked the number, turned the phone face down, and looked up at the people across the table from me. The ones who'd shown up because they wanted to, not because we shared a last name. The server came by with the wine and asked what exactly we were celebrating. Balance, I said, and lifted my glass, and for once the smile reached all the way up. The books are finally even. The thing I keep coming back to, even now, is how fast a story can harden into fact when nobody bothers to check the edges. My father didn't decide I was a thief because of evidence. He decided it because it fit a shape he'd been carrying around since I was 7 years old and got blamed for a sleeve of cookies I never touched. And my sister knew that shape better than anyone. She didn't steal that money and then pick a random scapegoat. She picked the one the family was already primed to believe in. That's the part that should scare all of us a little. How a lie only works when it's resting on a foundation somebody else laid years earlier. I think about cause and effect a lot because it's literally my job, but that night it stopped being a job. Every single thing that happened to her and to Marlowe traced back to a choice they made and then refused to own. He borrowed money he couldn't carry, so the payments came due. They counted on gifts that weren't theirs to count, so the panic set in. They built a fraud on top of a marriage that was already mostly debt and image, and when you build on something that shaky, it doesn't matter how convincing you are at the kitchen table. The floor still gives out. The repossession, the annulment, the noodles in a basement apartment 6 months later. None of that was bad luck. It was just the bill arriving. What saved me wasn't cleverness alone, and I want to be honest about that because it would be easy to make myself the genius of this story. The footage existed whether I was smart or not. What actually mattered was that when the easy door opened, just pay the $8,500, swallow it, keep the peace the way I always had. I didn't walk through it. Refusing to lie about myself, even to make the noise stop, that was the real fork in the road. You can be the sharpest person in the room and still lose if you're not willing to stand on what you know is true. So if there's anything I'd hand to you, it's 3 plain things, not as a lecture, just as someone who learned them the hard way. Be the person who checks the edges before you condemn somebody, because the people who skip that step are the ones who hurt the people they love the most. Build the kind of skill and patience that lets you read the fine print, pull the thread, see what's actually there instead of what you've been told is there. And then, when it costs you something, find the spine to act on it. Bonnie pulled up footage in 20 minutes, but it would have sat in a folder forever if I'd lost my nerve in that dining room. I didn't get my family back. Not really. Not the way it was. But I got myself back. And I've come to think that's the trade worth making every single time.